Well, I'm here to tell you. My name is Olivia. I've been affected by muscular dystrophy in a lot of ways. Three subjects to bring up would be myself, my parents, my brother. And we'll start with my brother, who is Hawkins Fink. He died at 20 from Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. He was diagnosed at 6 years old with the disease. And my whole life they told us that my brother was going to pass away. What was wrong with him? And of course, my mother made the choice to have me tested as well. So they shared with her about the fact that little girls can be carriers of the disease, which means you don't have the disease, but at any instant that you have a child, you could pass on the missing proteins in the disease that creates the disease, and your child can be infected. Your little boys can have muscular dystrophy, the Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, or your little girls would be just passed on the choice that you have to make about your own children. So I was tested as well, and they did find out that yes, I did carry the genes that contain the muscular dystrophy. We'll touch on that in a moment, but for now, with my brother, um, I lived my whole life watching him just deteriorate into like a blob or a wet noodle. It was what we used to say. You know, he could walk, and my mom first noticed something was wrong because he started walking on his tippy toes, and he would fall often, and she knew something wasn't right, so she took him. We lived in Oregon at the time, to a small doctor. You know, we're talking about the early 90s when research really was in effect, but it wasn't nearly where they've come in the last 10 years. So it was a new thing, you know, and finally they sent him to specialist after specialist and test after test, and, you know, they determined what it was. And let me tell you, like like Hurricane Katrina may have ripped apart New Orleans. You think about what this disease did to a family and how it can destroy so quickly that family value that you have. I mean, what does a mother do when she's told her child is going to die? Like, and not even like an instant thing, a deterioration. You watch this child that's perfectly fine just deteriorate. There's nothing left. You know, my brother, in the end, could not even feed himself. He definitely couldn't use the restroom on his own. And in the last 10 months, when he would go in and out of the hospital, it was bowel failure. They would remove all of the waste in his bowels in order to allow him to function a little better, and there just was no muscle tissue to push anything through. And then breathing. How do you breathe without muscle? You know, the whole point of how we work and function is with our muscles, you know. Without that, he couldn't breathe. And then finally, it takes your heart muscle. That's what Duchenne's, the particular strain of muscular dystrophy, does. And he died in the cardiac unit of the hospital on October 29th, 2006. And he was ready. I mean, he fought a long, hard fight, and he went through several things and fought with a battle that was kind of a losing battle, although he put a smile on his face every day. And I'll tell you that what I learned from my brother was probably the most amazing thing that a human being could teach another human being. And that is basically, if life throws you shit, you make brownies. But he just was so good about that. He would smile, he gave other people strength, and he showed them that even if things aren't what you expect them to be, you can make the best out of it no matter what. And he taught me the value of how to treat people and how to be kind to people. And even if you're in a wheelchair, that doesn't mean anything. It's an electric set of legs because we don't have, you know, they don't have legs. They have legs, obviously. They're not gone, but I mean, they don't function correctly because of the muscular dystrophy. And I appreciate the two hands and the two legs that God gave me and what I have, because I can walk and I can talk and I can be an advocate for my brother and share his story. So hopefully, and maybe you'll all understand, to donate money to help with this disease. The Muscular Dystrophy Association Telethon is broadcasting tonight from 6 p.m. to midnight. Please tune in and take the opportunity to donate money. This is a horrid childhood disease that needs to be stopped, that needs to be researched more and more, and even though they've been at it for years, they still haven't reached that point yet of finding a way to stop this from happening to children. One request my brother made to me was to always try. If possible, when he did pass away, he wanted his remains to be donated for research, just because if he could save another little boy from going through what he'd went through, that's what he lived for. Was maybe if he couldn't stop it for himself, he could stop it for other children and younger generations, so that their effect with muscular dystrophy wouldn't be such a huge loss like it is to all of us that experience this in our families today. The next thing to move on to is that my mother and father, having a child like that, it was my father's only son, and he couldn't really cope correctly with how does this happen to me? How does this happen to my only son, to my blood name, to the child that is mine? And my mother, of course, how does a mother deal with that? They did their best, is what I could say. Not all of us are made strong enough to deal with everything. Some of us are a little stronger than others. They fought as hard as they could. There was the stress of life. My parents were both working class people. They weren't people that were able to have millions of dollars set aside and to spend every moment with their child and to put all their own money into what they could. They did everything they could for my brother, whatever it was. Trial and tribulation of life. Of course, my parents, they weren't able to stay together. It was a huge stress load on them. And when my brother was 9, I believe I was 11, we didn't live with our parents anymore. I had a wonderful aunt, regardless of what may be said ever about her. She took in my brother, who was handicapped, and myself, so we got to stay together. We didn't have to be a part of the system. We didn't have to not be together, and she did that for me with my brother. And, we lived with her until I was a teenager, and my brother stayed with her, and then eventually, at the end of the day, my brother wound up living with me as I was an adult because, what he gave to me for my spirit, how could I not give him my physical ability to take care of him? That's kind of what I had to do because it's my brother. And family is first, no matter what. They're all you have sometimes. Losing my brother really was tough. I had my first child, which was a little girl. Thankfully, I had her tested and she was found not to be a carrier or anything of this disease. So it's been stopped. God gave me her and she's perfect. And it's kind of amazing that even though Hawkins isn't here, when he passed away, my daughter was 6 months old, and I was given a whole reason to be able to continue on. And as I healed through the pain of losing him, which will never be 100%, at least I know my job here is to share his story and the fact that my daughter is here and perfect, even though it's just the grace of something being given back to us, I believe. So as I spend the rest of my life caring for her and her awesome little self, I'm going to continue to help with research for MDA and everything possible to carry out my brother's dream to find a cure for these other children. The last thing and how I was also affected by muscular dystrophy is my brother and I kind of made a deal. If my mother would have been able to know that my brother was going to be sick like that, if she would have known at any time that it was in our family and it was something to be tested for, she would have done it. And who's to say, my brother's thankful that he got to live here and thankful for his 20 years, and I know that, and I'm grateful, and it'll never, never be a better thing given to me than that gift of my brother. But he asked me to try really hard, that if I ever got pregnant again, he encouraged me with the testing for my daughter Destiny. He asked me to not have a child that would be born with muscular dystrophy like he was. He wanted me to get testing if there was. And one beautiful thing, and something where your research does go with the money that you donate, is I was pregnant again, and it was a little boy, And thanks to the phenomenal research that's been done, they're able to take genetic tissue from my child at an early stage before the fetus is actually developed to determine if the baby is going to be born with the disease or not. And unfortunately, and fortunately in the same way, in a bittersweet way, I guess you could say, I found out that the little boy I was pregnant with had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. The hardest choice a mother can make is, do you have that child? Do you do that to your child? Or do you play God and have that option of just not having the baby? No mother that's a real mother in her heart would ever want to give her child away. Period. But I watched my brother suffer for 20 years in a way that no human being should have to suffer, so per my brothers and my pact that I wouldn't have a child like that, I made the choice not to have a baby that was going to be sick like that. But it would have been better if maybe they could have replaced the missing information in his DNA in order to make everything work correctly so he would be fine. That's where your money goes. Maybe there's a hope that they're going to find a way to have cured my child so that he wouldn't endure the pain that my brother endured. I love my brother more than anything in the world. He's my best friend. He knew everything about me. That's one advantage that you have to your siblings, is that even when your parents don't know, even when grandma doesn't know, your siblings know everything. You share everything with them. You share your whole life with them. And how I'm able to sit here and talk to you and deal with the fact that he's not here is because he told me he was ready to go. He was tired. He lived as long as he could. He fought as hard as he could, and he stayed with me until I was an adult woman with my own child, with my own family, and he made sure that I was okay. And I'm thankful for the blessing of his soul, of having him a part of my life. And even the small instance that he was with my daughter, she knows him well. Even though they didn't spend much time together, she knows the story. She knows he was special. She knows how awesome he was. And as she gets older, I know that I'll be able to share with her the greatness of his spirit and who he was. So I ask you to donate anything that you can. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, every bit is important to research in order to stop such a horrid childhood disease. In closing, I hope everyone does everything they can each day to treat each person better than they may have before. Try to focus on the positive of your life and with people. And don't hate each other. Don't take for granted the fact that you have a grandmother or a grandfather that may be in a care home or something like that. Go see that person.